speaking the facts. If you man enough, come stand with us, take USA back. And every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is American.
Good morning, Patriots, and welcome to the Patriots Prayer Podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Smith, and today we have an amazing show for you guys. We have two ex-FBI whistleblowers on the show today, and I'm talking about Nate Cain, and I'm talking about David Baumblatt. Nate Cain is a congressional candidate out of West Virginia. Now, you just heard Nate Cain's three-part series with me earlier on this week, and prior to that, you heard David Baumblatt's story. Now, Nate Cain, for those of you who don't know, is the FBI whistleblower who blew the lid off the Uranium One deal involving Hillary Clinton. And between the two of them, you're going to hear a conversation that's going to be absolutely insightful, and at other points, it's just going to piss you off. And I'm being honest with you because they're going to give you a peek behind the curtain you normally wouldn't get. So with that, guys, I only have one more favor to ask before we get into it. We had just started posting to our YouTube channel. Now, we constantly, because of the material that we put out there, because we're so leading edge, because we don't back down from stories that other people do, the algorithm is constantly pushing back against us. So in order to get the kind of traction we need to put this everywhere and make it as viral as it should be, I need your help to do that. Like, follow, subscribe, and share like you've never shared before and get this information out there. So with that said, guys, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Nate Cain, David Baumblatt, the Patriots Prayer Podcast. Have a good one, guys. Enjoy.
My people of this country and we're under attack. They banning us, they cancel us for speaking the facts. If you man enough, come stand with us, take USA back. And every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is American flags. American flags. American flags.
Good morning, Patriots, and welcome to the Patriots Prayer Podcast. I am your host, Eddie Smith, and today we have a couple of American patriots with us. And returning is David Baumblatt, ex-FBI agent turned FBI whistleblower and author of the book Patriots Betrayed, as well as Nate Cain, a congressional candidate out of West Virginia, also an FBI whistleblower, known for what he exposed about Hillary Clinton. Now, both of these guys have proven themselves to be true American patriots and true American heroes in my book. So I'm going to bring them up here. Welcome, guys. How are you?
Hey,
Thanks,
good to be here.
Hi, Nate.
So, there's so many things when you have a group of guys like this to talk to, so many angles that we could take here. We talked a little bit prior to coming online, but I wanted to ask Nate, first and foremost, how is the campaign going?
Campaign is going good. It's hard work because I'm doing it the right way. I'm getting out there and talking to people. I had some volunteers. We went out yesterday and we knocked on about 400 doors. And spent 4 hours out there, actually talking to people and getting material out there. And so that to me is what is the right thing to do, because if you don't understand what your constituents want and what they need, if you don't know what the heck is going on in their lives, then how can you actually represent them? So that's what we've been out doing and getting to know people and talking with them. So it's been good.
Yeah. And how's the book doing for you, David?
No, it's helping out. Like I said, this is the first time I've ever been to social media. I'd say about a month or so. So pushing out there on social media. And like I said, I think looking at America from abroad, seeing a lot of this stuff, I've always wanted to sort of dive in and say what was going on. So it's just another good voice to add to the mix of what's the problems going on in America.
Well, I mean, right now our problems are our representatives. Honest to God, they are our immediate problems, and they are the cause of a lot of the problems that we see in the United States. Anyone seen the headlines today of Rashida Tlaib got caught saying the quiet part out loud? Obviously, we all know how anti-Semitic she already is, but she literally called for the eradication of the Israeli state openly. She actually said it that way. I wish I had the clip, but I don't have the clip ready. But yes, she literally got caught saying the quiet part out loud. And I mean, so many of these guys are doing that. And we've seen Jamal Bowman on camera pull down the warning signs, pull fire alarms. We've seen her lie after receiving intelligence briefings that Israel blew up a hospital, and it turned out not to be true. But she went out and said it again in public, even after knowing that it wasn't true, and actually gave the fiery speech prior to those people that are calling for Antifada to rush our capital, and in a true insurrection and a true seditious form. I mean, did you see it? Anyone see it?
Well, if I could put my comment in, especially when I'm living abroad, especially when I live in a non-Western country, my critique to the politicians would say this: I'm amazed on how many politicians either don't like America, number one, or they like foreign countries more than America. And it just seems like you put those two together, we've got a problem in terms of America first. It's time to look at America first. So we've got politicians who don't like America, or it seems we've got politicians like foreign countries more than America. Mm-hmm. But I think America first is the way to go.
Yeah.
You know, that brings up an issue that I think is important. And, you know, we were kind of, I think, talking offline a little bit about this. But, you know, how many people that, you know, are in Congress that actually were lobbyists before, and or foreign registered agents representing the interests of other nations.
Right. Yeah. Like the Bidens literally were foreign agents in a right. truest form and didn't register under FARA.
That's right.
And Nate, I did something, and I'm curious from your perspective on congressmen or senators, in terms of dual nationality. I think congressmen and senators, is there a rule that says you cannot be a dual national? I don't think there's a rule. Have you heard anything?
There's an awful lot that are. And well, so the hard part, right, the difficulty in trying to enforce that is that in the United States, while the United States requires that you cannot have dual, they will not allow dual citizenship. So in other words, like say you're born in Germany, for example, and you become, you go to become an American citizen. The United States requires that you reject your other citizenship, but the other country will not accept your rejection of it. So there's that. There's this issue of where you have even if you revoke it, the other nation won't. So the argument to be made by the person who has dual citizenship is, well, I can revoke it all I want, but it doesn't. It doesn't matter. They're going to give it to me. But where I have a problem is that if you are an American citizen and you go and gain citizenship in another language, at that point, the United States, they should revoke your U.S. citizenship.
Absolutely.
So in regards to having that like positive, dual citizenship, I don't think that should be allowed.
Yeah, I think there's 2 points, and I think we could separate it between private. I mean, we could do it for every single American, but I think there's definitely a difference between a private citizen versus someone connected in the government, influencing government policy, like a congressman or senator. But I actually think the United States government, they allow you to be a dual citizen. So I do think, from the United States, if you're a U.S. citizen and you want to procure foreign citizenships, I don't think the U.S. government has a problem with that. And I personally don't have a big problem with it if you're a private individual. But if you're connected with the government or influencing the government, I think it's amazing. From a counterintelligence standpoint, I mean, this is common sense 101. It is something we should be looking at.
Definitely.
And did anyone catch the headline of Obama? He put his 2 cents in on the Israeli-Hamas conflict in trying to play this centralist role between the two, stated that no one's hands are clean. Trying to make it out. I mean, that statement is such a backhanded thing to say. I mean, to say that Israel is on equal footing with Hamas after what took place, I think is a really low thing to say. really low thing to say. Any thoughts on this? Have you seen this?
Yeah, I saw the clip.
Yeah, I did not see the clip, but I definitely think that there's a propaganda, obviously a propaganda campaign within the United States by the pro-Palestinian organizations and whatnot, and they clearly are pushing this ideology of free Palestine, but most Americans have no idea what that even means. The fact is that Hamas themselves within their own charter do not acknowledge the right of Israel to exist. They want the Israeli, people, the Jews in particular, wiped off the face of the planet.
That's literally in their charter. I think it's like the second portion of their charter. That's and if you understand what Obama's kind of angle was during his tenure as president, and he said as much, he wanted to make sure that the Middle East was equally armed, so where that Israel wouldn't have the edge. This is the reason why he played the games he did in regards to Iran. He wanted in Iran to be equally armed with Israel because he thought that it would establish a certain peace instead of giving all the military superiority and backing of the United States to Israel. And he literally went about doing that. Israel at one point took matters into their own hands and with their own air force went over and blew up a nuclear installation inside of Iran. Now, we continually tie Israel's hands behind their backs or get involved when Israel would have handled these things long ago. They would have dealt with this stuff long ago, but every time they start fighting back and it gets to a certain level, everybody jumps in and says ceasefire. And then a couple of years later, more citizens get killed by these terrorist attacks. And then everybody wants to continually point the finger at Israel for being occupiers, colonialists, whatever the hell they want to call them. But they don't realize that Israel's been trying to bring Palestine to the bargaining table for years, and they refused to come. They offered them 90% of the West Bank. The 10% that they didn't want to give up would have made Israel, portions of Israel, indefensible. So they wanted to keep those, but they offered them 90% of it back. They abandoned the Gaza Strip in 2005. When these people attacked Israel, it was mainland Israel. It wasn't in Gaza. It wasn't, there was no occupation, but so many of these clips, and I love it. I don't know if you guys play around on X, formerly known as Twitter, too much these days, but the libs of TikTok do an amazing job at exposing the idiocy of the left on these issues. But it's laughable. There's some of the things these people on the left actually believe are true in regards to this conflict.
Yeah. Well, it was
go ahead, Nate.
I was just gonna say, I'm struck by, when you look at there's a video that I saw that showed the missiles, pouring into Israel, flying out, from Gaza. And this young man is, shouting Allahu Akbar, and he's praising God for, the destruction of Israel. And then the next scene, it says before and then after, and it shows, after Israel retaliates and he's crying and all of this. And it made me think of that famous quote by Golda Meir, which is that peace will come when the Arabs will love their children more than they hate us. And I really do think that is the problem.
Oh, that's powerful. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. And so, the reality is that when, if they want peace, it's only going to come when they love their children and the future of their children, then they hate the Israelis and the Jews. I mean, that's really the truth of it.
So I will, just so that the people watching can preface what you just said, I'm going to play that clip. I have it. I show it quite often, in fact. For every reason that you probably think. This is a great clip. And it does show exactly what Nate is referring to. These people, this guy in general, he's praising the fact that that these missiles are shooting toward Israel. And he's very happy about it. As you can see, he's extremely happy. Watch.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله يثبت المجاهدين وينصرنا يا رب العالمين. الله أكبر لسه الصواريخ بتطلع. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أحلى صوت ممكن تسمع في حياتك. الله أكبر. الوضع كتير صعب الوضع كتير صعب كتير شهادة كتير وجرحة كتير قاعد برقله شهادة قاعد.
He didn't like it so much when the rockets were coming back in their direction.
That's right.
At all. So,
That's right.
yeah.
And that also reminds me of another, famous, but much, much less a civil quote, is the one, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, and that's really, how in the world did you think this was going to end? I think that, I think they thought they were going to be able to start a war in the Middle East and get every other country involved. But,
it's not over yet. They might just actually end up getting their wish on some level. I mean, we all know that we're Bible believing people, and
right.
Israel was attacked from the north. There is a lot of prophetic things that took place. Saudi backing out of this deal was a prophetic thing. It's all very prophetic. So, I mean, I'm sitting back watching, wondering, is the conflict going to end, or is it going to spiral out of control and things have the balls in motion, eschatology wise?
So two comments I have from leadership, both from foreign policy and domestic policy, is this, because we see the rhetoric from the Palestinians in America. If we are going to welcome a multicultural society, then this is what's going to happen. Meaning, just like with the congressmen or senators, I mean, this is what we want. If we're going to have, immigration, multiculturalism, we are going to have different groups. Meaning, today it's going to be the Palestinians, tomorrow it's going to be other groups. But
so let me ask you this, David. Let me ask you, so because people are going to term what you said as segregationist. People are going to flip that around and spin that in any other way. But I and correct me if I'm wrong, you mean the abuse of our immigration policy, and
I would say Nate's a military guy like me, and Nate will know immediately the most important resource in a country, a corporation, is people. That's our number one resource. It's all about people. I just want to know, in a country that we're constantly told we want to be security independent, oil independent, food independent, can't disagree with that. Makes perfect sense to me. But when it comes to our most important resource, the people, not only do we want to be dependent on immigrants and foreigners, we think it's good. I'm just saying, maybe we should start thinking about, maybe why can't, American citizens, I'm sure there's reasons why they're not having children. There could be money issues or whatnot. But I'm just saying, why is it so good to be dependent on immigrants, that it's your most important resource? So I would say that would be one point. And then the second point is, when it comes to our foreign policy, this is very different, as I've studied with China. In America, we get a new president every 4 years. That you got to ask ourselves from America, what really is our foreign policy? Because, American taxpayer money, we got soldiers, and it's, no, we're into Ukraine, we're into, even Israel, it could change. So I do think the American people ask themselves, before we get involved in all this, what exactly is our foreign policy? And I think the way our government's set up is, it just could change. The new administration comes in, it could change. And so that's why they feel like, where's my tax money going, during this administration?
And I'll ask Nate this. Nate, you guys both of you have a unique perspective, being as though you were both FBI agents. How do we, I know how you feel about this, David. How do we fix this? How do we go about undoing this Cosa Nostra like FBI that we're dealing with right now?
So, one of the things that I've talked about and prayed about, quite honestly, a lot is, answering that question. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Lord willing, I get elected. Now what?
You will be.
Person out of 435. I can't, I can't just unilaterally make a decision. But what I can do is I can work to convince my fellow members of Congress, and I can use, the court of public appeal to make the case and use the media to get the message out that, number one, this is a dangerous thing, not just for Republicans, not just for conservatives and patriots, but this is a dangerous thing of having a police state for everyone. A federal court that put out a statement, I want to say it was a month or two ago, that there were over, I want to say it was 257,000 illegal searches by Section 702 of FISA. Why that matters is because these are warrantless searches that fall under FISA, which is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. When I was read onto that program, the system was never allowed to be used against American citizens and, quite frankly, or against foreigners on American soil because it was warrantless. That's right.
Even if they were on American soil, they had constitutional rights.
If you are in the U.S., you have constitutional rights protecting you, and that's
Is this got anything to do with the way that Kennedy made it to where the CIA couldn't act on domestic soil, or is this just the way it's always been? And I'm asking from a layman's.
Well, the Constitution, applies to those that are in this country, and so it doesn't just apply to American citizens, but it does not apply outside of this nation's borders. So let me make that clear.
What about the 14th Amendment? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll wait on that one. Go ahead.
So the point is that when this system was put in place, if we had if we unmasked some metadata and it turned out that it was an American, we had to delete the entry. Period. That was the rules. And in fact, if we used the system, because there were some cases of where guys had used it to spy on their girlfriends or their their wives that they thought were cheating on them. And they told us flat out, if you misuse the system and you spy on Americans with it, you will go to jail for 10 years. So I'll be honest, I was not interested in using the system unless I absolutely was required to do so for my job. And because I was afraid of the consequences of, even a, little temptation at all, not even, no way was I going to do that. But what has come out is that apparently it has been used and abused multiple times. Like I said, this one federal judge said that over 257,000 times, the majority of those were used on people related to January 6th. And many of them also had to do with people who were protesting at the George Floyd protests. That should make this a bipartisan issue for both the left and the right to rally together to say, we're not having this. This thing expires December of this year. At the end of December, everyone needs to be contacting their legislator and saying, you better not reauthorize this thing. Absolutely. Or I will vote against you in the primary. That should be, every one of these members of Congress should see that, because the fact is that it's been abused. And an IG, by the way, said there's been millions of misuses.
Yeah. And even more, Nate, and I say that, and I write this in my book too, but the FISA Act, there are already congressmen and senators, Rand Paul is one person who comes to my mind. It's unconstitutional, but it's like anything Supreme Court, people debate, that's why decisions go. So you have some, congressmen and senators say no, especially national security. But if you're a strict constitutionalist, it is unconstitutional. That's how they're spying on me. There's no evidence.
That's right. If this tool was only used by, like, say, the DIA, in defensive military operations, or by the CIA, which only is supposed to be operating outside the U.S., then maybe I could see, it having some, some legitimate purpose. But why in the hell the FBI, a domestic agency, has ever been allowed to even, have an opportunity at all to use this system? And now they can apparently use it, all the time. That should never have happened.
Snowden. Go ahead, David. Go ahead. I'll say.
Well, and again, we everyone is allowed to argue a little. I have no problem letting it use against foreign nationals. I know. Nate makes a good point. I could care less. I used it, but when it comes to U.S. citizens, no way. It is a bright line rule. It needs to be abolished yesterday, not today. Yesterday. It is absolutely unconstitutional. I mean, I could tell you stories in the FBI where they were doing U.S. citizens. A U.S. citizen decided to take a trip to North Korea. I don't think there's anything illegal about going to North Korea. Now, we didn't
raise his eyebrows, though.
It raises eyebrows, but Yeah, but you got, it's a slippery slope, Eddie. You know, you do an investigation now, FISA, because he goes to North Korea. I guess, what does he go to a North Korea restaurant in America?
Well, yeah,
Like,
there are limits,
where does
but
it go?
I mean, I'll be in full disclosure. If a regular American citizen was going to North Korea, knowing what we know today, I don't necessarily agree that there should be FISA violations and that sort of thing with this guy. But I definitely would be keeping a close eye on him. Otherwise, within whatever purview I could, because he's definitely got some questionable something going on.
Well, and that's a great point. The problem is we'll take it down a notch. Now we're going to say that there's a rally in America that is pro North Korea. You know, we got some of these communist organizations in America, you know, pro communist,
Growing all the time.
Yeah, so he doesn't go to North Korea, but he goes to some communist pro North Korea rally. Do we start there? Or now we take it down a notch. He doesn't go to a rally, but he's now going to college and he's studying all about North Korea stuff. So the point is, as you can see, it's not criminal. It's got this very subjective layering. Where do we go or not? And I think the key is, if it's a U.S. citizen, we got to make sure, what legal violation is he breaking?
Exactly.
Now, there are things the FBI we could do that's on the peripheral, but you got to be really careful, because you want to start cases out with an illegal act. You know, there are people, even my West Point friend before, he tried to convince me to go to North Korea. I said, "Are you kidding me? I'm probably going to be arrested there." But he went. I mean, some of these are crazy dudes. They like to go to North Korea and they want to, you know, do that. But we got to ask, is that illegal? It's not illegal.
Yeah, and the system has to work. It's that simple. The system has to work, and the only way it works is if it has checks and balances, and it's the law. The law has to be abided by, because this is exactly the problem we have with the Patriot Act, Victory Act, NDAA, and the others. Is just it leaves so much speculation able to be used in order to violate the rights of everyday citizens.
Have you noticed the ever-alarming 400,000 cell towers that have gone up in the United States alone? How about the electronics that reside in every room of our homes, and Wi-Fi that runs 24/7? 5G cell phones are carried in our pockets hours on end. Common complaints are ringing in the ear: sleep deprivation, palpitations, headaches, memory loss, and so much more. Redemption Shield is on the cutting edge of offering products that protect your family from electromagnetic and microwave radiation. From Faraday bags, earthing bed sheets, Wi-Fi router covers, hats, scarves, bed sanctuaries, this will not be going away anytime soon. We will continue to see only faster speeds, 6G, 7G, and more exposure to EMF than any time in our history. Start protecting yourself now. Go to redemptionshield.com and get grounded and shielded today. Use code PATRIOT and save 10%.
If you just terms in the definition of terrorism is so broad and it's so vague that it can be applied very easily. You both know that. It's very simple to just tie someone to some sort of national security threat, and then all of a sudden your constitutional rights dissipate immediately, and they can do whatever they deem fit under the guise of national security. Now, I had a question about the 14th Amendment, right? And we see a lot of these guys right now. Our border is, I don't even think we have a border, but these people are coming across. A lot of them are military aged men. We see what's happening abroad, and we know that there are people from those adversarial countries that have already entered the United States, from Iran and other places. We know. We've actually seen video of them being processed. We see them being handed plane tickets and envelopes where they're going to airports and going to whatever city they say to these people when questioned. This leaves me to believe, I mean, this is right for let me set the hypothetical. This is hypothetical, but let me set this tone. If they say the United States cannot be taken over from another country, it can't be defeated by another country outward in, right? But it can be, you have to do it from the inside. But if you change the landscape of the United States so much by allowing this onslaught of illegal immigration, and you allow military-aged men to pour over our borders, and then you strategically place them across the country, wherever the hell it is that they want to go, and now you have an army inside. You have an army inside of your country. And this is my fear of what's taking place right now. Anyone else share that fear?
Well, And that's what we talked about when we
Absolutely.
in the beginning when we talked about the Palestinian sentiment in America. Well, if you allow immigration, they're going to become citizens, and so I'm a little different than Nate, and that is I'm definitely pro. If you're a U.S. citizen, the government needs to get off your back, get out of your private affairs. If you're a foreign national, I'm okay with that, in terms of, doing what we got to do. But if we start handing out American citizenships like Cracker Jack boxes, again, the fourth or whatever, well, then now I lose that argument because then because again, if you're a US citizen, I want freedom and I don't want the government, to get in your private affairs. Well, that could be a backdoor into a future terrorist or spy,
That's
because
right.
if they're like, well, it's not that hard to become a US citizen, well, then my argument doesn't work. So we have to protect who can become a US citizen.
If you take a look at the UK right now, I could pull up clip after clip after clip. And when I say hundreds of thousands, I'm not talking about tens of thousands, 1,000. No, I mean people like the grains of sand. When they were protesting, they have these pro Hamas, pro Palestinian protests going on in Ukraine. They have parts of the UK, and I didn't know this until last week because I never even considered it, that have whole areas or districts or whatever inside the UK that are ran by Sharia law. Their culture has been hijacked. People were arrested for reading the Bible out loud in the streets in the UK. I didn't know this. I'm still in shock. This is really what's happened, and this is because of immigration. That's what it is. We are losing our culture.
The UK has had a problem in that it's not had a right to free speech. Well, let me rephrase that. It has not had a right to free speech enshrined in the Constitution. The idea of our constitutional rights in America, they are. It's not that the Constitution gives us our rights. Those rights, our founders believed that those rights were part of natural law, that those rights were given to us by God, that we're born with those rights and that nobody, can interfere with them. Certainly not the government, but that the whole point and purpose of the formation of the government is to protect those rights. Now, you were asking about the 14th Amendment, and one of the big problems and there's been a lot of debate on this, and I actually
The anchor baby thing is where I was going, but I got sidetracked. So.
Yeah, no, and I know exactly where you're going. So the fact is, if somebody's born here, the question is, do they automatically get citizenship? Because under Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, it says that all persons born or naturalized in the United States. But right here is the section that matters, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
That's what Vivek was talking about right there.
And why that matters?
Tried to turn it into a racial thing because he's trying to say it was only applicable to slaves, because after slavery was abolished, they wanted to make sure they had the rights of typical American citizens. But what you're saying,
but the reason that we know the reason we know that jurisdiction matters is because if you are a diplomat here in the United States and your child is born here, your child does not get citizenship. Period.
Exactly.
Yep. And the reason why
John McCain was still termed a United States citizen, even though he wasn't born in the United States.
That's right.
He was born in Panama.
So you basically are you're under the jurisdiction of the country in which you're here, as a diplomat. Now, for illegals, the argument that is made, and I've heard some really articulate arguments made by constitutional attorneys, if you're here illegally, you're not here under the jurisdiction of the United States because you're not here legally. So that means that your child that's born here is not under the jurisdiction of the United States, therefore is not a naturalized citizen.
That's my take.
Or is not a citizen born here. But the problem becomes, what do you do with all the kids that are born here that have never that were born under non-jurisdiction or whatever? And that's what that all they know is English and all they know is American life. So we've got a problem because even if you were to even if the courts were to agree that this is the case, and therefore a whole lot of people here in the United States that were born here are no longer citizens. Then how do you handle that? How do you deal with that? So
Send
I
them
think
back to
that,
their country of origin.
well, it's
We've
not
done it
so
before.
easy.
We've done it
Yeah.
before. We did it in 50s.
I understand what you're saying, but I do think that there's the optics of that would not look good if they start rounding up a bunch of kids.
And that's true. But the idea, the open-mindedness and the liberal mind of the United States are the reason we're in this mess. Unfortunately, being nice is not always going to play to our benefit in the long term. It's going to be the thing that is our undoing. So making the hard decisions and the unpopular decisions is the only things I believe may save us.
I think that there's an argument to be made, at least, that because the government has been unambiguous about it, that they have not enforced the law and all of that, that it's created this nightmare situation where you have a lot of people here, kids born here, that think that they're citizens, and it turns out they're not. So what I think would need to happen, and I really do think that this is probably the most compassionate solution that still enforces the law, is you create a period of time, maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years, but it's got to have a limit, where you say, look, you've got this much time to get your act together, make, basically get your affairs in order and get the hell out of the country. And if you do so, and and you can make a compelling argument that you have a job, you have a business, you have means and all of this other stuff, and you're not going to be on the system, you're not going to be on the public dole and that sort of thing, then you can go and immediately apply for a green card and get basically get yourself into a situation where you're here and under legal status.
I can get behind that.
You're not going to be a citizen. And I would even say there needs to be some sort of penalty in to say, hey, not only are you not going to be a citizen, but your amount of time that it's going to take for you to become a citizen is now double, because basically you kind of jumped ahead of the line. But you give people a period of time. If they've committed any kind of felony, then boom, they're out.
Go ahead.
If they've committed any kind of violent crime, drugs, sex trafficking, anything like that, any kind of crime that's something that the American people don't want in this country, you're out. Get out of here. We don't want you back. You're not welcome. And if within that period of time, if they don't get their act together and they don't leave the country, and when I say they have to apply, it means they have to go out of the country and then apply. They can't do it from inside the United States.
That was Trump's policy.
And if they don't do that within that period of time, not only will they be kicked out of our country, but you will never be able to return. So in other words, you make it such a stiff penalty for not, and not only that, but you will be kicked out. You will not, pass go for $100. You will be kicked out. You will be sent back to your country of origin.
Can't even visit.
Never to ever return to the United States again.
Well, let me ask you this: would you fast track someone in that situation that says that they would enlist in the Army, Navy, Marines?
100%. I'd be okay with that. Provided they're not a felon, provided they're not like somebody that's either dealing drugs or committing sex crimes or violence.
You guys can answer this for me better than just about anybody else. We get people that come here to this country. And I have a hard time believing we know what their past is. Here in the United States, we electronically keep records, fingerprints, things like this, details of your criminal past and that sort of thing. But when you get people here from Iran and other Middle Eastern countries and third world countries, we don't know who they are, what they've done, if they're just genocidal, homicidal maniacs, and we don't know.
Well, maybe Eddie or Nate, either one, can you answer? Remember the 2 Chinese spies? They were in the military. Something. Remember they called. Were they U.S. citizens or were they Chinese citizens on a visa?
I don't remember, but you do bring up a good point, and that is that in the military, when I was in, we had some incidences, right, involving soldiers. One of them was a soldier that stabbed a taxi cab driver in Japan in the neck with a knife. because he didn't have money to pay his bill that he had ridden all the way down to Yokosuka base from Tokyo. There was also another case of a young woman that was raped, and it became a huge scandal in Japan. She was a Japanese woman was raped by an American soldier. What was not reported, in the mainstream media, was that both of these guys were foreign nationals, and they were foreign nationals serving in the United States Army. And so there is a problem if you just allow them to come into the military in order to fast track their citizenship. They still got to be vetted.
Yeah, we have to know who you are.
They still have to be vetted.
I'm really on the fence with that. I still don't like the thought of foreign nationals serving in the military. And it's a shame. Wouldn't it be great if Americans want to serve in the military? So there's something going wrong in America that obviously American, citizens don't want to serve. But I mean, my gut is I don't like foreigners serving in the U.S. military.
It's because it's too hard, David, and they got to sweat and get up early. That's what
I mean, and that's what's happening. Or maybe we make a special unit, not like the French Foreign Legion, but a special unit that's for foreigners that we could sort of vet better, and they don't have any secret classified information. I don't know, but I'm on the fence of allowing foreigners to be military. I don't, and it's not just from a security standpoint. It's more like patriotism. Like, why are foreigners protecting our country? Like, what's wrong with our men? Like, I don't know. So it's part security.
There's a war on men. If you haven't noticed, there's a war on men.
There certainly should be a limitation to the amount of foreigners that are able to serve in the U.S. military, because so the way that I kind of see it is not a bad thing is, let's say that somebody has a green card. They've been here. They got to meet certain criteria. They can speak English. They meet, the vetting process and things like that. They should be restricted in the jobs that they can do. They should not be able to hold a security clearance. There should be limitations, but they can play an important role. For example, let's say that, somebody wants to be, let's say that somebody is here on a green card and they're from Japan, and they want to serve in the United States to gain access to, being able to become a citizen of the United States. They could play a useful role in the military in some sort of liaison position, because the likelihood is they speak Japanese. I would be okay with that. However, should they be in a position where they have access to, intelligence, that is classified? Absolutely not. So, there should be certain restrictions that are applied. But
you know what the left would say about that? The left would call that a racist policy.
Yeah, I don't care. They left can call it what they want. It's a national. It's not, it has nothing to do with race. It has to do with nationalism. And, and so that's the other thing that cracks me up.
That's another that's another dirty word with them.
Sure.
Nationalism.
Sure. But people want to have, they want to make a claim that, that the word Mexican, is a racial word. It has nothing to do with race. It has to do with their nation of origin. Right.
Mm-hmm. So
if somebody is here, and and they're Mexican, then the truth is that there's certain policies. I would have a problem with them say, if they're not an American citizen, I may not trust them, to be working, as a border patrol agent,
sure,
watching our border. And it has nothing to do with any kind of racism. It just has to do with their nation of origin.
This happens in our prisons all the time, Nate. Exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
Prison guards that grew up in the neighborhoods where those people are from end up going to those prisons where their people are housed. And as a result, that's how they get our communications. Drugs move in and out very easily. There are a lot of things that happen in that regard. And I know that firsthand. I know that 100% firsthand. That is a true statement. And directly with that race of people, the Mexican people, especially on the West Coast.
Yeah. Now on that, going back to the 14th Amendment, what bothers me more than anything about all of these amendments and in our constitutional rights is that, I think it's the last section of that amendment where it talks about that Congress, shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation, that article, right? But what do we see happening? We see a president, an executive branch that refuses to enforce the law which is written by Congress. They just don't care. And so to me, the biggest issue that I see going on right now in terms of Congress having somewhat lost their power is there's no enforcement of these laws that they pass because the Biden administration is lawless. They don't care. So this is why Congress needs to impeach, needs to impeach Biden, and quite frankly, should be impeaching every single one of the cabinet members that are not enforcing the law, and any judges that don't enforce or don't judge on the law, but are trying to legislate from the bench should be impeached as well. Congress has that power, and then maybe they can't, get Biden kicked out, but they can expose to the American people how he is violating his oath, how he is, violating what the very laws that are being passed, who, are being passed by our representatives. And then, they have the power to do something that I have not yet seen them do.
Well, here's the thing about the
power to defund.
Cut them purse strings.
Yep. And they need to do it because, when Director Wray gets called in and he's asked a question by Congress who, have oversight, the Judiciary Committee calls in, Director Wray, and they want to know what is going on with your investigation, into Hunter Biden or whatever. And he says, well, I'm not at liberty to say.
It's an active investigation.
Okay.
They use that all
fine.
the time.
We're going to subpoena your documents. Well, I'm not going to obey your subpoena. Okay,
literally,
fine. And you no longer have a budget, and we are impeaching you as the director of the FBI. The fact is, these are the kinds of actions needed, the boldness needed by Congress to enforce their enforcement of the law. If they're unwilling to do it, then impeach them and defund them. Period.
That's exactly the only way they forced him to obey the subpoena the last time. Was they were going to hold him in contempt, and that's when he caved. But prior to that, I mean, he lied to Congress, which was a felony prior over the FD 1023 form. He tried to say it didn't exist until Grassley and others came out and actually started quoting things that were inside the form to let him know we know it exists and this is what it says. And then his story changed. Then they subpoenaed him, and he didn't even care. They don't.
On that note, I do believe, though, that the FBI, according to the Constitution, they are subject to the president, not to the Congress necessarily. So that being said, I don't see how the FBI, in all honesty, can investigate.
When the president is the one that we're talking about, though, in this form, I mean, he was the guy who the FD 1023 is about. It's about a pay-for-play bribery scheme.
So in that situation, the president needs to be impeached, because not until he's impeached can they really have a true. And I think a special counsel should be investigating the president at that point. Well, and honestly, I don't even believe that. I think we have a major problem right now in the way that the executive branch there's no way of holding them accountable. There's a group called Tactical Civics that I've listened to a lot of what they have to say, and it makes sense to me. But what they say is that there's something that's supposed to be in place called the People's Grand Jury, or Citizens Grand Jury, by which a citizen.
Yeah, it's a Citizen Review Board. Yeah,
that's right, Citizen Review Board. And then what the point and purpose of the militia was not about fighting war. It was about having a trained and authorized group of citizens that are authorized by the court to go arrest the public official who is, committed, high crimes and misdemeanors against the nation. That is ultimately what I think we are going to have to put into place.
And it's the only way, because otherwise, what are you going to do? Say, Director Wray, stand up and handcuff yourself?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not going to happen. So this is why people are talking about abolishing the FBI and these sorts of things. But I say the only way that you can actually fix it is you have to have somebody that has the authority to investigate it that is not under the authority of the same FBI they're investigating.
That's right.
And so what you're talking about is absolutely necessary. Now,
yeah.
They say
there is something that our Congress gave us, though.
What's
Under
that?
Article 1, Section 8, they gave us something called it's called a congressional tribunal. And when you read when you read it in its context, it seems very clear that the intent of it was for adjudicating agency issues. And so I think that that's what we need is we need an Article 1 tribunal. It does fall under the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, as it should. So they answer to the Supreme Court, but they're not within the Article 3 courts.
So
So
here it is, Nate. It says Article 1 tribunal includes articles courts. This is also called legislative courts, appeals courts, ancillary courts with judges appointed by Article 3 appeals court judges or administrative agencies and administrative law judges. So it doesn't really go into detail as to the meaning of that, just that.
No, but when you go through and you start digging into the Federalist Papers and things like that, what you see is the intent of it is not how it's being used today. Right now, it's used for like the U.S. Tax Court and some of these appeals courts and things like that. But what's needed, I think, or what its intent was to adjudicate agency issues. So in the case of the Department of Justice, in the case of the FBI, you could create this court in order to adjudicate essentially, the crime of deprivation of rights under color of law, or, abuse of power, or, misappropriation of funds and things like that. And I think that's where a court like that would be necessary. And then you would have, the prosecution, right, would be would be brought by the citizens, grand jury. And then the enforcement arm of that court would be, the militia to go and basically make the arrest.
And I think that's why they actually demonize patriots to the level that they do, because they know if they're ever, if they ever organize, that would be the end of them. So you have to demonize them.
Yeah, I mean that would be on par of a civil war. Meaning for that to happen and the FBI to allow that, I mean the FBI, no way. Yeah, it would. I mean, any type of outside force, I'd be interested. I mean, in terms of the Constitution and the regulations, what it says, but for some type of militia or outside force to go in and apprehend or whatever with the FBI director, that, I mean, we're talking a major issue.
Well,
right
it reminds me though, think about like what happened in the United States back, in the 1800s, right? You had U.S. Marshals, and you had your local sheriffs, that basically had flat out wars with one another. I mean, that was like the whole basis of,
yeah. So I do predict if, and I think maybe Eddie, I had said this, if the situation, these are some of my predictions of civil war. I do predict that eventually that we might lose the federal level and we go to the state level. And I mentioned that the states are going to become radicalized,
That's right.
meaning just red states. And that I do believe, we're talking the governor, the state police, even the National Guard. That could be a standoff where the governor tells the FBI field office, whatever the governor of Texas says, FBI field office Dallas, you are now shut down. You have no jurisdiction in the state of Texas. Get out. I could actually see that happen. Now, of course, it'd be huge, but in terms of legality, I actually could see that happening.
Texas is the only one with the ability to do that legally in the United States.
I actually see
contractually.
Not secession, but I don't know. I think any state could, any governor could probably kick out a federal agency.
Really?
That's what I'm saying. It's going to have to get. We're not at that level yet, but I see that possibility of how would we push back to the federal government. We would have to have a strong state governor, the governor of the state, where he knows, because that governor needs to make sure he's protected. His state police is behind him, even maybe in National Guard. I mean, it gets into a lot of legalities between state law and federal law, but I could see that. That's where I see a standoff happening.
Yeah, I'm also suspect too that there may be a way that an elected sheriff might be able to tell the federal government that look, you cannot come into our county,
Exactly.
and we're not going to allow you in our county, so get the hell out. I could see that, and and if the county sheriff had the balls to actually basically he would have to know that he's got the back. And where I could see that happening is in a place like West Virginia, where they say, look, because, out here, people are very, very much, they're all about freedom, and they're all about not having their rights stepped on. And I could see a county sheriff basically telling the FBI that, they can take their jurisdiction and shove it and get the hell out of our county. If it was about the right issue, if it was about the FBI trying to come in and take people's guns or something like that. Oh yeah, I could see that. They've passed they've passed some local legislation in the state to make certain counties Second Amendment. What do you call it?
Constitutional carry.
Well, no, Second Amendment. Oh gosh, what's the terminology for it? Basically, they'll protect you in that county, and they won't allow an overreach by the government.
Yeah, they've already kind of really done a lot with the Second Amendment that I don't believe that they should have. I mean, when the document says there should make no law, I mean, that's pretty explanatory, no law. But they continually try to justify. I knew as soon as they made Kamala Harris the head of the gun violence task force, I said, oh shit, here we go.
Yeah.
It's going to be some gun violence here. And not even 2 months later, what happens? It's not, we knew exactly what was going to happen. Didn't know when, didn't know how. I just knew that big or small, it was going to be highlighted, blown up in the news, and that she was going to be at the center of it. Now she's saying that basically she idolizes the way that Australia did their forced gun buyback. That would not fly here.
No,
that would not fly here. So I have another thing I want to ask. So has anyone seen the Jesse Waters piece on the Biden administration and the FBI had 40 informants for 15 years inside of the Biden family, and bringing them from the time he was vice president, bringing them information. And they were bringing them information they say that they had the Bidens dead to rights for the last 15 years, but instead of prosecuting them, they flipped them, and now they're using them to do the things they want to do, which is why this war is going on against Trump and other people, is because the FBI is blackmailing the Bidens. Have you seen this?
I have. It sounds exactly like, what I blew the whistle on in regards to Hillary Clinton. The FBI had Hillary Clinton dead to rights on all kinds of money laundering, public corruption, terrorism financing, securities and exchange fraud. I saw with my own eyes, and I carried out 457 pages of classified documents. Namely, most of them were, suspicious activity reports that had been already reviewed by FBI analysts with FinCENT, and they already had high probability of criminal activity under those 4 codes that I gave. And this was being done by 3 separate field offices. They had multiple case and file numbers, and yet they shut everything down. They shut it all down.
Why do you think that happens? I mean, we never talked about that last time, but why in the hell do you think, what was their thinking behind shutting it down? Who were they protecting? Who were they taking those orders from? And who's in control?
That was the 7th floor. They were afraid Hillary Clinton was going to get elected, and they didn't want reprisal from her.
Yeah. So like I said, when I was in the FBI, when you're looking at, foreign counterintelligence or counterterrorism, what is happening overseas or with our adversaries, it's more removed from the U.S. citizen. However, the really nitty-gritty dirt is the public corruption squads, because these are the people looking at the people that have more power over us, our governors, our politicians. Our tax money is paying them. Mm-hmm. And that's really the disloyalty versus, what China, Russia's doing. And that is very, very political in terms of how they do stuff. It's very sensitive.
It's wild to me because, I mean, you remember Loretta Lynch being on the tarmac, and she's sitting in the plane, and Bill Clinton's plane pulls up right next to hers. He gets out of his, walks into hers. Hillary's being investigated at this point over the email situation. And he goes into this plane and he sits down with Loretta Lynch, and comes out like a half hour later and just says, yeah, we were just talking about our grandchildren. I mean,
right.
It's right in front of our faces. They're colluding and they just expect, and no one does a damn thing. No one says anything. No one forces the issue. As much as I love Trump, I was like, man, why you had that time? Why didn't we see more action behind these situations? Bleach bitting your hard drives and beating your devices with hammers. And Patriots, I told you. I said it was going to be an amazing interview. And that's just part 1. We got part 2 and 3 coming up next. These guys go even deeper. And don't forget, there's exclusive footage on the other side. There's exclusive footage in our locals. Just go check out the locals. Go to Rumble, click the locals, go ahead and join. Subscribe to the Patriots Prayer Locals today, guys. We really need your support, and we appreciate your support more than you know. So with that said, the silent majority, you need to stop being silent and stand your ground. We'll see you next time on the Patriots Prayer Podcast.
My people of this country, and we're under attack.